We're at the home of F1 fishing, Partridge Lakes, jiggers and overshotted rigs. What is your take on this style of fishing?
I mean, I used to shy away from it a few years ago because I could win matches fishing a fixed rig with a short line. And, when I'm coaching nowadays, a lot of people want to know about overshotting the rigs and jiggers and fixed rigs and all the rest of it. I always say to them, there's a time and a place for each one. Like, they're all slightly different. Um, in the past, people used to fish like an overshotted rig with a big heavy shot like a BB or an SSG, and that will work. But as people are getting more and more aware of F1s and how they feed, and a lot of people think F1s come charging in your peg. They don't. They sit below your bait, you feed, they rise up and they drop down. So if you can imitate that slow fall, like, you can catch more fish. So with an SSG where it would be bombing through, if you have less shot down your line, say 3 or 4 number 8s or 2 number 8s or whatever it may take to overshot your rig, your fall is going to be slower, you're going to get more bites. Basically, you're giving fish to see the bait more. So an overshotted rig can be brilliant for that. And then venues like Lindholm next week, I'm going there, an overshotted rig's not allowed. So they have an 8-inch line limit there where you can't fish a short line. So straight away, my little light floats are out of the window, because if there's any sort of wind on it, then your float's blowing about, and you can backshot your rig, but your rig has to float when you've backshotted it.
So you can't go and
you
put
can
a
only
BB behind the
is that still a rule
behind
on
your
there?
float.
I thought he got rid of that.
He might have got rid of it, but I'll just have to check when I go next week.
Oh, I've just been cheating.
So,
Wouldn't put it past you. You're known for that. Aren't you?
but sometimes you could control your line behind your float to your tip with, say, 2 or 3 number 8s. Now, if you're only fishing a rig that takes 2 number 10s, your float, when you lower your back shots, even though you're not going to, or some people may or not, whatever, is then going to sink. So people class it as an overshotted rig, which it's not really, but that's what they say. So straight away, my little rigs that I like fishing, say, here, because there's no rules, they don't work at Lindholm. And I always remember a match about 3 or 4 years ago on a festival, and it was me, Paul, and Ryan Law all in a line. And Ryan was fishing a jigger, getting one a chuck. Me and Paul weren't really catching, and we did have some manky casters, but I had some fresh ones behind me, so I started feeding them. Never made a difference. I got up off my box, and Paul had never seen a jigger. He'd never seen it down south where he fishes and things. I've got up off my box, set this old jigger that I had up, a big massive jigger, went in, started catching some fish, and that was the day really when I realised, hold on, there's something to this. You've got a lot more line down, a lot more weight down your line. You can keep your rig tight, which in essence is what all F1 fish, shallow F1 fishing is about. If you can keep a tight line and create as much of a bolt rig as possible but make it natural, you're going to catch more fish. So like with a jigger, you manually lower it, where with an overshotted rig, the fad now is to sort of flick it up, let it fall back down naturally, flick it up, your line is going to tighten itself up and the fish will hook itself. Some people say it's easy, but you only have to look at the same anglers who are winning week in, week out.
Yeah.
Your likes of Chris Weeder Jr. at the moment and his dad, your Open Shores, people like that who are fishing the matches regular here. They're winning all the matches between them, and
it's definitely a misconception that it's just putting an overshotted rig in. Like you say, there's those certain anglers, even Mitch Rawlinson, who's around
Blundell's
here as well.
Comes here now and again.
They're all doing well. I think I said it with Andy. People like Chris Weeder, Mitch, they're always going to get a chance in these big qualifiers, because if they're given a peg in these qualifiers with a bit of room where those tactics work, they dominate. And it's no coincidence if it was just an easy method, everybody could do the same. They'd get that peg and whoever was on that peg would win. That's not always the case. They dominate from just not even the best pegs, but because they're doing those methods better.
They're getting the most out of the peg, basically. And your likes of Mitch and Weeder, they don't just have overshotted rigs set up, they've got fixed rigs so they can learn where the fish are. You might have some anglers who will just set up overshotted rigs and they'll go through them, but when I actually qualified for fish all that day, my peg was absolutely solid, the best I've had it on here for probably 2 or 3 years. I caught 214 pound and I had 8 fish on an overshotted rig. You know, I tried the jigger, I knew exactly what depth the fish was at, but a light fixed rig with a short line was 1,000 times better. And that's the thing, is like, every day is slightly different. If the fish are feeding aggressively, which sounds a bit daft, but that day they wasn't, excuse me, that day they wasn't. They were in my peg and it was solid with them, but they would only touch it when it was falling through. Whereas you could come now and the temperatures are up and the fish are a lot more active, they're buzzing about a little bit quicker. You know, we've not had like loads of heavy rain like we did leading up to the fish show. And that's what people don't realise, is you can come today and it'd be flat calm and an overshotted rig could be useless. You come tomorrow, there's a big wind on it and it could be brilliant, or the jigger could be brilliant. So for me, I always set up 6 or 7 shallow rigs, and even though I know the fish maybe say from 1 foot to 2.5 foot deep, I've got different weights down my line in terms of, like, a jigger might have say 3 or 4 number 8s, and then my light rig might have 2 number 10s or 2 number 11s. It's a totally different fall. It's just like picking up a waggler with shot down your line and shot strung out and no shot. You know, it's not all about, like, you've got to get your feeding right, you've got to prime your peg. You don't just go in and just start catching fish because you've got this magical rig on. So for me, it's, you know, I can see why people frown upon it, because at times you can go in, it's like fish on, tap the water, fish on, but they're obviously doing something right because they're catching fish, and that's what we go fishing for.
It's not like, well, they're still having to find the fish and stay in contact with them, get the feeding right and get them where they can catch them most easily.
Yeah.
Especially because of how popular these methods are now, it's not just one person doing it and dominating, which potentially, like here for example, Steve Openshaw for the last couple of years has really dominated, done really, really well, and he sort of, in a way, he had that to himself a bit. He was doing it, but less people were sort of twigging onto it, whereas now more people are twigging onto it and thinking, you know what, we have to do this to compete.
And fine-tuning it, getting better. You know, as anglers, we're all getting better every year. And I think social media has a massive part on things like that as well. Like, when I was growing up, you couldn't learn how to fish a river or anything like that unless you picked a magazine up. Whereas nowadays, you know, you can... people will tell you, I've caught on this, I've fed this. It's not... natural fishing is not as accessible as commercial fishing, but commercial fishing now, you can go out, you can have a day's coaching, you can buy a video, you can click on Partridge website and you can see exactly what they're doing, because Babs will be walking around filming, and then you know how they've caught them fish then. Obviously you have to put it into practice, but you can see, right, yeah, he's caught 5 metres shallow on maggots, so when I go there at weekend, that's what I'll take, and I'll do a bit of this and a bit of that, and you know, you're halfway there.
With what you're doing now and kind of the little tweaks that are making the big difference, it probably helps you more almost, that everyone's on that same playing field, but the little tiny differences almost become more important.
Timing's a big thing, like picking up, you know, a lot of people go in at one depth, say if you're shallow fishing, catch a few fish, but if you've had the experience and you know, this is alright, but I could be catching quicker, then you'll change to something, you'll be catching a little bit quicker. Whereas some people, if they're not match fit, if you like, sometimes it's too slow to change. And 5 hours, you know, if we fished a 20-hour match, the best peg would always win probably, because they're going to have more fish and they're going to catch for longer. But 5 hours, it's a long time, but it's not too long. Like, if you make a mistake for an hour and you fish the wrong tactic, wrong method, it's 20% of your match gone. It's 20% of your weight missed out possibly.
I love this venue, but through the summer, when I fish once a week and I've got a lot of team stuff in between, I'm on the rivers, I'm on the canals, a bit of everywhere, and I'm a bit all over the place, not just in terms of the venues, 'cause I don't mind that so much, but the type of fishing I'm doing. I can come here and I'm off the pace. Whereas when I come in the winter, I don't feel like it's quite as important, because I feel like there's fishing for less bites, working the peg out's easier. Whereas coming now, when everyone's so on it, they're doing it multiple times per week, I'm always an hour behind, and I feel like at the end, I thought I did well, but I was £30 off winning the lake or £10 off winning my section. Whereas I know that if I'm in tune, I'd have got that right. So definitely,
it's almost going in with the right thing, isn't it? If you're even if it's just the wrong, like tunnels, another one where it's like if you go in with the wrong bait and have to waste the first half hour and have to change stuff round, suddenly it's like you're half an hour behind, and as long as they're not, there's people aren't going to make enough mistakes that you can catch them up most of the time. But yeah, going back to all the fixed rigs, jigging, monging, whatever you want to call it, I think the biggest thing for us was on almost your deeper venues, like you were saying at Lindome, but on Loco, where it's like the big old wise F1s, where you fish like 3-4 foot deep, where you almost wouldn't fish it with a traditional shallow rig, and it would just be a nightmare generally.
Blowing about, you're going to miss bites, you're probably not going to see a lot of bites. Like that day when I seen it on Loco, and Ryan had like £180, I literally had like say £40, and when I switched to the jigger I caught £80 in the last 2 hours. I was catching £40 an hour, so my peg was probably worth £200 that day, and I caught 120 maybe, something like that. And that was the difference. Like that's when, you know, that night we went out, myself and Paul, got some jiggers, made them up, went and practiced that night, and I think I went on to win this section every day afterwards and come second in the festival. But that first day cost me the festival because I was third in my section, and I think every one of us who went on Benny's that week, who stayed in our lodge, won the section on Benny's because we'd all sat there and practiced it at the night time. I think
Is that
Johnny
when you bashed us up off the next pack?
Possibly. But Sam was with us, Sam Slockett and Johnny, and they both all went and won the sections, or lakes even, and none of us had a jigger at the start of the week. And if we'd have been stubborn and not fished it, we wouldn't have won. Do you know what I mean? So you've got to have it in your armoury. I
think that was almost the phase, wasn't it, where it was starting to come in, become a bit more acceptable, and a few people were like starting to try it out. And I suppose they get to a point where you got to say we're gonna have to get involved, and
if you
as long as it's in the rules.
If you don't get involved, don't bother going, because it's only going to upset you, and you're not going to compete. And you know, it's like, I'm not going to that venue because they catch on a method feeder, so I'm just going to fish a bomb. But it's not the same. Do you know what I mean? You're fishing rod and line, but you might as well be fishing a pole. If that style of fishing dominates at that particular venue, then you have to have it in your armoury.
So that's what you're going with. It's fair game. You've just got to get it
better
in your
at
armoury, get better at it, and just try
practice
and compete.
it, try and learn it. Same with any method. You know, doesn't last all year round. It has its little time and place, and you know, don't get drawn into it either, because it's not the be all and end all. I think all my biggest weights on here have always come on a traditional rig. So like, I know how deadly it can be, but it's not my go-to thing. Like, I'll always try and work out first, at least for the first half of the match, where they're at, and then possibly try, right, I know they're at 16 inches deep, right, let's stick an overshotted rig on and see if I can catch quicker. If it's not, back on your normal rig or your jigger, just try, you know. But there's time and a place. Like Lindome is a perfect example. If you go there and you fish venues like Benny's and Loco and you try and fish a normal rig, you're probably not going to be able to compete, so you need to learn it.